I have just an outline that I'll follow, and you guys are more than welcome to jump in and ask me questions at any point. The way that you labeled this of like lessons learned and what was it, practices or processes, I kind of in my mind, I tried to sort of 50-50-ish, like separate my notes on that. Um, Also, this being recorded, just one technical side note too. I wonder if, well, I don't wonder. I'm sure there would also be a simple way to turn all these into audios for a podcast or something. Because I know for me personally that the what is it? I already forgot the solo law firm, True
Um,
Solo, New
new,
Solo.
new
Yeah,
solo. Yeah.
yeah. That I just like listening to podcasts while I do stuff is a higher probability that I will listen to it.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
So
I'm recording it, but I don't know if anybody's ever going to watch it again, but we'll see. But
yeah.
no, the
So, but
podcast's a good idea.
yeah, if we turn it into an audio, maybe it'll be more widely listened. We'll see. But yeah, so kind of first starting with lessons learned and kind of big picture, I think is one of the main things I wanted to start talking about. Um, and I think the big thing with that from the very beginning is, and not that this is revolutionary, but to really know your why. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you going out on your own? What are your convictions? Why do this on your own, not under somebody else? Because I'm sure there's people, and actually I've listened to some people who they had so much set up when they went out on their own that it was pretty seamless. But I would guess that more often than not, there's going to be a lot of obstacles, struggles that you might run into that are going to make you question if you really want to continue to do this thing on your own. And it's going to be your why in those moments that I think is going to be what pushes you through or makes you more ingenuitive, um, to think through the challenge that you're facing. That's definitely been the case for me. And for me, a lot of it has been from the beginning wanting to advocate for people, quite practically wanting to work for myself and ideally generate enough income for my family. Um, and frankly, that I had really bad experiences in the legal field working for other people. So I just wanted to work for myself. Um, but also, a big piece for me has been my faith, has honestly been central to doing my own practice. And so, in those moments when I've really wondered what I need to do, frankly, I've had to pray and think through what I'm doing and ended up continuing with it. And it has continued to get better and better. And I'm after about a year, it's gotten to a really good place. Like now, whereas I might have had obstacles in the beginning, I'm still gonna have obstacles. But now, from a practical financial standpoint, everything else, like I'm in a good place, which is a great place to be. But it took some time to get there. And everyone's different, but I know one person that I talked to who started their own firm. She told me that she didn't take a salary her first year, and I can at least say that wasn't my experience. Um, so it was at least better than that. But everyone's experience is going to be different. But whatever that experience is, I think knowing your why is going to be critical to sticking to it. And I think if you stick to it with a lot of the tools that are available to us in today's world, especially for solos, there's a lot of things that can help you get off the ground and help automate your practice to make it financially viable. So, um, know your why is basically my main thing, probably more than anything else, to continuing and being in your own practice. Another, and so then I just have like a, I don't know, general tip or just general thing that I think is important to keep in mind. And I got this tip from a post. So I do a lot of post conviction work, and I was speaking with someone who's a post conviction expert at the School of Government in North Carolina, and I had made a mistake on a filing, and he just said, "Well, it's the practice of law for a reason." And while obviously that could be abused, I definitely, in the moment of making a mistake, I appreciated that that comment from him. And I would say that because also doing post conviction, I have followed behind a lot of other attorneys who have made some pretty big mistakes. And so I would just say, in general, no matter how well you know your why, no matter how committed you are to doing a good job, I know one of the biggest hurdles or things that can feel intimidating starting your own practice is like, I'm going to screw up and I'm going to commit malpractice. Um, and I mean, there's no way to have a crystal ball and know the future. Like maybe you will. I don't know. You do your best not to, but the reality is it is the practice of law and it's very complicated, but you are very qualified. You passed the bar, you went to law school. And also, and I know that I'm sure that Mark has talked about this, and this is at different places in your curriculum, but it's a profound need. The reality is that sure, it would be great if every single attorney could be apprenticed to the nth degree to cover every area of need in the legal world, but that's just not the case. It's just not true. There's a deficiency of lawyers, especially in the access to justice spaces, and so you're more qualified than the person representing themselves, and so trust yourself. And then yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but to be a little bleak, that's why you have malpractice insurance, because mistakes might happen. So definitely have it. I know that's kind of required anyway, but also because it is the practice of law, and there are extremely experienced attorneys who make really big mistakes. One of the most comforting things I also learned at one point was I know a friend whose boss, he's argued in front of the Supreme Court um, for immigration issues. He accidentally slept through a hearing and his client got deported. So there's some really big mistakes that can happen even for the most experienced lawyers. So give yourself a little bit of grace and know that it's a practice and you're getting better, but it is still practice. And I think that's okay. And so, yeah, I mean, I made some list of a few things I messed up on. I have to go into too much detail, but yeah, I've maybe, well, two things. One, like I've made a filing where I failed to include something that was essential and I got it fixed, but it was a mistake on a filing. Um, One of my first hearings, there was like a basic discussion of stipulation, and I just had a massive brain fart on what a stipulation was because it was one of the first hearings I was at, so my brain was not used to it yet. So but the other attorneys were gracious, and it was all fine. Aside from feeling mortified, I felt fine later. So, um, and I don't know, things like that are going to pop up, and I would just say that's part of being a solo, and honestly, no matter how experienced you are, it's part of being a lawyer, I think. Um, and I've seen some really bad lawyering as a post conviction attorney that makes me feel a little bit better. As far as trying things, so this isn't so much a mistake. I mean, it's kind of a mistake, but to Mark's point about kind of being a business owner and trying things that don't work out. So I spent a lot of time working on, and I do still know a lot about it, but learning a lot about what's called asset forfeiture law. And I even wrote a booklet on it because I wanted to be potentially a passive income stream or just something that would be small that other people could access. And it just, I ran ads and everything. It just never panned out, never gained any traction, didn't work. And um, I just had to kind of scrap it and move on. But um, and then I learned from that, though, some of the things that I didn't look at with the market for that type of law before I spent the time on it. And I know that's kind of generic, but I think it's true that part of being a solo is sometimes you might just try things and it's okay that if it doesn't work out, because I think it's better to try to be creative and try things out than to, if you're sitting on your hands and there's no revenue, then it's better to do something than nothing. And it's through that there's been things that I have tried that have worked really well, and I've been happy to see that, and I think fortunate in a lot of ways. So those are kind of like, that's kind of the generic big stuff that I've talked about, I guess, is like knowing your why and knowing that no matter how good you are and you apply yourself, you're still going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And to try new things, and I think that's going to help your practice grow if you're open to trying new things. So in terms of generic lessons learned, those are the things that jump out at me. The rest of what I would talk about is more of the processes, which within that I have lots of little tips in there, I'm sure too. But I don't know if there's anything from what I've shared to this point that you wanted to ask about or pry any further. If not, I can go ahead and talk more about processes and such.
Yeah, well, one thing I appreciate that you've done, and maybe you'll get into this with processes, is just that you have innovated, you've tried different things, and like you did the video, you like do a
Yeah,
little
video
video of
ask.
yourself, video ask, and so I don't know if you just maybe explain little bit about that, or if you're going to get to it later. I just thought that was a cool kind of innovative thing that not everybody's doing, but you tried it and you see what worked, what didn't work. And I think you're doing TikTok too, TikTok as well.
Yeah, I have done they're up, they exist, and they're on the homepage of my website. I do need to do more of them. I haven't done a video in like a few weeks. My goal was to do like one a week, and that never happened. But what I did is I made like 10 or 15 all at once to just sort of like have a bunch to actually have some kind of presence. And then I try to do one a week for a while and just kind of tapered off. But like I've gotten clients from TikTok. I don't know how many. Um, but you know, it works. Now, the interesting question is, I think Montana made it illegal, and I do wonder if it's going to spread to other states. But we'll wait and see on that, I guess. But to your question about video ask, yeah, that's kind of like baked into series of the processes and stuff that I want to talk through.
So Adam, in those TikToks, are you just giving advice, like general conversations, or are you like dancing and doing the moves too?
I'm not. I think that's a combination of I'm not video edit savvy enough slash have the time to do the fancy videos. Like I've done a lot from some video editing and I can figure it out, but like I just haven't spent the time on that. And so my videos are very much like basic advice because it's not legal
Yeah.
advice, but it's on. So on my TikTok, it says at the very, like right under my name, this page is not legal advice. Contact me directly for that. Which I maximize the characters they would allow me to use to make that statement because I think technically have to pay more for like a business TikTok account,
Mhm.
and it gives you more flexibility on running ads to refer to your business website if you make a business account. But mine's just a private account that is essentially is a business account. And I do think one of those things was it limits like your disclaimer that you can make. Because I think if you have a business account, you can say more on your page. But I
Mhm.
just used like one sentence to make sure that I got the legal advice disclaimer out. But every video, it's on my webpage. I don't know if you want to put my website in the chat or whatever, but if you go to
Yeah.
my main page of my website, you scroll down, I embedded my TikTok page on there. So they'll just kind of start live playing in the background. Uh, and so I do post conviction and employment law. And right now, a lot of videos are employment law on the front end. So it's, what do I need to know about suing my employer? What are problems if I run into and suing my employer? What's the most common mistake people make is suing their employer? Things like that. And they're generally like 60 seconds. Um, that's the thing. Like part of it to your question about making it fancy, my mindset was if I can just take 3 minutes, like 60 seconds to record it, and then just like barely kind of edit it a little bit so I can just do it and get it done, I'm more likely to do it. And again, I'm still not even doing it that frequently, but at least that's enough that I might do it sometimes. Which yeah, I actually need to make a couple. I've been meaning to do that. But yeah, so Mark put my website in there. You'll see it on there. And it's also you're gonna see the video ask videos, which I'll talk about too in a second. Um,
Cool.
all right. So in terms of processes, but I guess this is also still kind of big picture, but when I was thinking through this, the various times I've run into obstacles, I guess it makes you think through what you're doing. Um, I kind of came down to this sort of like three major uh, strategies to live by in running your own practice. And one was trust your why, and two is trust yourself, and three is trust those who know more than you. Um, and that has really helped me a lot. And so I already talked about trust your why, because that to me, at the end of the day, it's a lot about your own conviction of what you're doing. In terms of trust yourself, like again, you passed the bar, you went to law school, you know a lot more than you think that you do. Uh, Trust me, there are lawyers out there that have a lot of experience who would probably do a worse job than you would. It's out there, and so trust your ability and your intuition of the law because it's better than you think it is. But also part of trust yourself, which I'll talk about more in a second, is trust your automated processes. Like you can put smart processes in place that you can start to trust and know that they're going to work as long as you set them up right. And that takes a tremendous amount of stress off of you, but also just makes your business better because things are taken care of that don't require a lawyer to do, but they're things that a computer or an assistant can do. And the other one, trust those who know more than you. That's a big one for me, especially as a solo and a newer attorney. So I practiced for just under a year before I went out on my own. I very much live by this. And you may already know this, I don't know, but I was told that lawyers would be willing to help. And so it's not that I didn't believe that, but I still don't know that I could have been prepared for how willing lawyers are to help you. Experienced lawyer, I mean, I'm sure there's lawyers out there who are either A, jerks, or B, just really busy and just don't have the time to talk to you. And either way, I don't know, but I rarely run into them. And the only scenario I could run into, I think, where maybe a lawyer is not going to help me at all, which is sensible, would be if they're opposing counsel. Even opposing counsel, depending on the opposing counsel you have, and you all may have experienced this either in clinics or Jared in your own practice at different times, but are still willing to be collaborative, but obviously they're not gonna, and it wouldn't make sense for them to hold your hand. But outside of that, I have made it a point to connect with attorneys who are experienced in the areas that I'm practicing in, because they're very willing to help, and the ones I've found, and it didn't take a lot to find them, were very accessible. So some of the criminal law stuff I do in Tennessee, I have one guy in particular who I can text him any question. He's been doing criminal law for like 25 years here in Tennessee, and he knows like everything. And he is always responsive. I try not to abuse it. I mean, that's a common sense thing, but he's more than willing to be helpful. And without him, there's so many things that I would have taken me so much more time to learn, and maybe wouldn't have gotten it as clearly as I would from like practicing attorney. Employment law, the mediator in my first case ended up being very accessible and willing to help me. She's a plaintiff's attorney. But what became even more helpful is she connected me with another plaintiff's attorney. And this would be another generic point that I would make. If you can find retired attorneys in your area of practice, that is a gold mine, because they know a lot and they have more time, and they're generally willing to help younger attorneys because they're retired and they just want to help the practice along. So my mediator slash plaintiff's attorney connected me with another attorney, and just recently I learned that she's retiring, and she's brilliant. She's been doing this for almost 30 years or more. And in one particular case I've been doing my investigation to decide if I'm going to take it, she pointed out to me a type of claim that is rare in Tennessee. It's called common law retaliatory discharge. So it's not through like Title VII and your typical employment stuff, but it's a common law remedy. And this client had reached out to a reputable employment firm here in the area, and they told him why they couldn't take the case. And it's because the Tennessee law is very restrictive, but they didn't even know to think about this other law. And because I just happened to know this really experienced attorney who told me about it, I all of a sudden look really smart because I just happened to know this like hidden cause of action that this other firm didn't know about. And it's just because it also helps, I guess, like she's a mom of twins, and her twins are grown. I'm a dad of twins. So I think she might've felt like a kindred spirit with me. But outside of that, most attorneys that I've talked to who are experienced in my area of practice, whether it be post conviction or employment law, they're really willing to help, and I lean on that a lot. Now I do still trust myself and a little bit above others, because it's still ultimately my decision. It's still ultimately my practice, and I still, in some sense, need to respect my own instincts. But I'm really going to get a whole lot from other attorneys who've done it a lot more than I have. And then the last example I'll share is in post conviction, and this would be another general strategy. If you can't, well, let me back out further. So in terms of strategy of connecting to people, you've probably already had networking, or you're going to have a networking thing, but on how to do that. But for me, one of the most helpful things has been listservs within my area of practice, because generally those exist. So like employment law, there's a specific group of plaintiffs attorneys who have a listserv, and I paid the money to get on that because it's more than worth it, because people will share templates with you and whatever else. Post conviction, I never found like a listserv, but for that, sometimes you can just get on the internet and you can search attorneys, and you can just cold email people. Like, it's not cold call, I don't know, cold email people. And I reached out to one guy, and because he had a bunch of online material for federal post conviction, and we stay in touch. And I have his number. We text sometimes. He has been super helpful, and he's referred a ton of clients to me. And that just started with me reaching out to him on his website, like, hey, I do post conviction, and I forget why. I don't know. I think I just reached out to say I'm just trying to connect with somebody else in this area, and he was very willing to help and connect with me, and again, has referred cases to me. So, um, finding attorneys who are experienced, however you can, and most of them are willing to just respond to a text or an email about any question that you have. At least that's how I've experienced it, and that has been hugely important for me. Um, Trusting your why, trusting yourself, and trusting those who know more than you has been a big thing for me. Yep.
Yeah, Adam, I was just going to, two things, well, a comment and then a question. But one thing that I really appreciate about you, Adam, and I think it comes through with your list of your three things there, is that your humility and lack of ego, that you're willing to, I mean, there is this sense of trusting yourself, absolutely, but you're also not afraid to ask questions and, contact people and just like, hey, I'm trying to learn. So I appreciate that about you. And the other thing, kind of going back to, you talked about putting smart systems in place. Can you give an example, or maybe you're going to get to that,
Yeah.
of what a smart, like you call it, a smart system, yeah, smart process in place, what that might, what's an example?
Yeah. Well, I have kind of that laid out here. I was going to get to in just a second.
Well, you can do
Well,
it in
yeah.
the order you want to do it. So I don't want to
Okay. That's
cut you off.
fine. Yeah. And I appreciate that. I mean, on the one hand, while I do think malpractice insurance is essential and is a good safety net, it doesn't mean that I'm any less worried about committing malpractice. And for me, I think the biggest way to try to make sure that I don't is to talk to attorneys who've done it a lot more than I have and know a lot more about it than I do. Um, and even then, I mean, you're still gonna make mistakes, but yeah, that's part of it. And I guess really, and I suppose this should be, hopefully, while we're practicing law, my goal is to help people and advocate for people. And so I don't want to, um, the only phrase that's coming to mind is kind of crass, but I don't want to half do, half do, half do my work for people. I want to do quality work for people. Um, and in some ways, it's just an efficiency thing too. And that I don't want, that's why I don't want to take advantage of it. Like, because I could just shoot an email every time I have a question. That's not helpful. But if I research it for a little while and then I know that this person's going to know the answer in 30 seconds, it's going to take me like 2 hours to find, then I try to like keep tabs on that and reach out because it's just going to save me time too. Um, so yeah, as far as processes, so the first process, I know this is kind of an overarching thing that has been really critical for me is rest and having a rhythm of rest to your work. Um, Whatever that looks like for you. Um, for me, it definitely has a spiritual component, but I know even in a non-spiritual context, it's kind of a known thing that having time for meditation or time to set your day or to have a true day off as much as you can every week um, just makes you more productive, makes you think clearer. You tend to get your bigger ideas, like, because part of being a business owner is now you're the visionary and you're the person who has to have those big picture ideas and long-term goals. And generally, I think research shows this. I don't have a slide to show that, but that generally our inspiration comes when our mind is the least burdened by all the other more, I won't say minutia, but just all the other details. And so having that space for creativity, I think, is important as a business owner. And I think that space really comes when you try to set down all of the stuff that you're carrying as a small business owner. And that for me, about a year in, really became very important because I realized even though the practice was doing okay, and I always thought this is really what I wanted to do. I realized I was a lot more exhausted by running my practice than I thought I would be. And what became clear to me was, well, because I really needed some intentional time on a regular basis to set it all down. And when I started doing that, then I started enjoying it more and frankly being more efficient with the time that I was working. So as just an overarching process to however you schedule your time, your work week, your calendar, um, I think it's really important to have time that you're not thinking about work, but even time that if you want to call it vision time, if you want to call it planning time, I want to be careful there because I don't want it to turn totally into a work task because I think you also need time specific for more administrative planning, but time that is just kind of detached from all of it. And because it's your business, at least this is how I am, I tend to think about my business even when I'm not working, but then it's in a different frame of mind that tends to be more creative, um, and more big picture. So, um, so that's one big generic thing. So another thing, and I don't know if Mark's talked to you about this or not. I know he mentioned it, or somebody mentioned at some point when I went through it. And I think there's five, and I always think there's four, and I forget. But generally, think of your practice in terms of big categories of time. And for me, I think of my cases, outreach, finances, and just kind of general administration. And where I'm at right now is I've basically gotten it to where I pretty much only work on my cases. I have more or less tried to set things up to where my finances and my outreach, uh, and my admin I have to do myself, but it's not overly time consuming. But my outreach and my finances are more or less automated through other services. Um, so regarding, so to talk about that and what, like how I've gotten there and why I've gotten there. First, I just kind of want to quickly, I'm going to list, if you ever listen to New Solo, they talk about your tech stack. And I think that's helpful. So the various platforms and various softwares that I'm using, I use Clio Manage and Clio Grow. Part of that is I use Clio's billing, um, and that's helpful. I use Lex Reception for people calling my practice, calling my number. I use QuickBooks and Remote Books together for basically all of my accounting. So Remote Books is $100 a month. QuickBooks is I think 28 or $30 a month, and Remote Books does my accounting for me every month. And for me, the thinking was my hourly rate, and we can talk about that too. I had fees at the end of this, but I charge 300 an hour. It kind of depends on the case. I might charge more than that. I know some lawyers charge less than that, but I've seen plenty of lawyers charge 300 or more, and I I don't know. I think that's fair. Um, so based on that, $130 a month would be like 25 minutes of my time, and I know I'm going to spend more than 25 minutes if I'm trying to manage my books every month. And so it was worth it to me to pay them because every month they just send me a profit and loss statement and everything just laid out for me. That was worth it to me. So I use Calendly for scheduling. I think that's like $8 a month. And that was super helpful for consultation scheduling with my call service and just generally for meeting with people. Because you always have this thing where you go back and forth. Well, I'm free now. I'm free this time. I'm free this time. I've gotten where I'll just say, here's my calendar. And you like anything that works for you, because then it just expedites that conversation. Um, I use Google Ads on my website, and that's huge for me. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But part of Google Ads too is it intersects with SEO or search engine optimization. And I've seen that pay dividends a lot. And then Video Ask, which Mark already mentioned, on my website. So with kind of all those things, the kind of how all those things like affect the automation of my practice together. So I'll maybe focus on outreach first because I think that was the biggest pain point, and I don't know this for sure, but I got to the point where I really had a sense that A, it was the biggest pain point for me, but I feel like it's probably the biggest pain point for a lot of businesses, attorneys, certainly small attorneys. Was I There's kind of two pieces to it. One, I just can't constantly answer the phone. I can't engage with prospective clients all the time. And B, I can't manage the financial stress of that all the time because it becomes so easy, especially as a small solo firm and trying to make money, so easy to obsess over getting the new client, getting more clients to make more money. If you're in a mentally better state than I am in that regard, that's great. And I tried to be, but the reality is when I'm constantly reminded of the new clients coming in, it's chronically taking my attention to think of trying to get those new clients and to overthink that. And so I just knew that I had to automate that to actually focus on the cases I already had, but also to just trust my business to grow and not need to meddle in that because I'm getting the calls and some of them are working out. I know I need to automate this more because it's just totally derailing my focus of being a lawyer and actually working on the cases that I have. And I get it, prospective clients, part of that is being a lawyer and talking to them in the initial phase, but even that you can automate to a point so that you're actually having a productive consultation and not just thinking about it all the time or talking to them and it's not the right fit and it was a waste of time to talk to them in the first place. So the first thing I did a while back was I started paying for Lex Reception. I know they charge more money now than when I first got it. Um, it's one of my biggest monthly expenses. I mean, I think it's at least $350 a month. Um, generally, but I think it's more than that now. I think it's closer to 400 for their base package. And they answer the phone and they know how to use Clio and Clio Grow, and so that was super helpful and important. And they're competent enough to use Calendly links as well. They do a chat on your website too. Like if you want them to engage with people through chat, they'll do that as well. And it's just based on how many minutes you use. And most months for a while, I didn't go over the 350, but then some months I have. But I did the math not long ago, and I don't think I've ever had more than $500 a month. I think it's been around 450 average. Um, and that's so yeah, I mean, if you map that out, I mean, that's about $6,000 a year. It's not a small amount of money, but it I just don't see myself being able to function with my practice without that service because I would spend so much time talking to new clients, and I do know mathematically I'm making more than that, more than enough to justify that expense. Um, but so that's why I did Lex Reception at the beginning, was just the calls. But then even beyond that, it I still had to improve that process a little bit more because they can transfer calls directly to me. We had to work through how consultations would actually get scheduled and how to try to automate that even further. Um, and so we were able to use with ILPI Clio Manage for free for a year. I don't know if they're still giving you that promotion, Mark, or not. Okay. So Clio Grow is either 50 or $60 a month. I'm sure it's shifted. And when I had the Clio managed through ILPI, one person told me, "Oh, you have to pay for the whole. You have to pay for Clio and for Clio Grow to get Clio Grow." And I said, "Well, okay, I don't want to do that. I think that ends up being like $150 a month or something." But then I just called someone else or I did one of the Clio Grow people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can work that out." And so then they did it. So if you currently have Clio managed through the incubator, if you wanted to use Clio Grow, just call someone directly from Clio Grow. And my experience was they'll give you just the Clio Grow package and not charge you for Clio Manage. And I started using Clio Grow because from what I could tell in terms of a new client pipeline, Clio Grow was I mean, I could be wrong about this. I researched as best as I could, but they were the only like intake platform that was really comprehensive and synced with a practice management software like Clio Manage at a moderate price. Because the only other one I found was Lawmatics, and Lawmatics is way more expensive. I think it's like $200 or $300 a month at least. And Clio Grow, I don't know if I've never really been in the tech space either, but I know enough to know that Clio Grow kind of looks a lot like Salesforce, which is essentially just a pipeline of from when someone calls to when they've been scheduled for a consultation to when they've hired you. And you just kind of run through the pipeline. You can set up automatic emails. You can't set up automatic text messages, but you can do emails and just kind of run people through that way. And when they run all the way through, you can just convert their file to a Clio managed file once they hire you. So you can track all of that. So I did that. So I had Lex Reception, I had Clio Grow, but still the big thing was that I tried to get Lex Reception to ask a number of questions to prospective clients to try to weave through people, but it took up way too much time. And frankly, there was just a lot of failure to communicate because these aren't lawyers, they're not paralegals, they're just legally trained receptionists, and just a lot of things fell through the cracks. It wasn't working, and so they could schedule, but I would still need a lot of information. And so then one of the most practical and most helpful things that I've done is use interns. Now I pay my interns, but I'll be frank with you, I pay them $8 an hour. I don't pay them a lot of money, but I know that there's unpaid internships out there. So I know I'm at least doing better than that because I want to pay something. Um, but it has been really a major lifeline for me because a 2 or 3L is extremely competent and extremely qualified, and you don't have to pay them you technically don't have to pay them at all. And if they work for you for free, then yeah, that's great. But I think I tried that maybe once. I didn't get much traction, and just generally, if I can pay anything, I want to pay anything. And so that's what I've done. But I hired an intern specifically for this purpose because I wanted somebody who could actually ask intelligent legal questions to my clients before we had the phone call. So I hired her and I just gave her a list of like legal questions to ask to text message them so she could have a text conversation with them beforehand. And that kind of finally resolved it for me because her job was to keep track of Clio Grow. That's basically what I hired her for. Was to keep track of Clio Grow, to text prospective clients, to line up the appointments, and then to text them follow up. You can automate some of that, but you can't automate all of it. And so that was part of why I hired somebody. There may be ways to automate it even more than I did. You don't necessarily need an intern, but for me, that really filled in the gap to really basically put intake entirely in the hands of software / a person at a very low cost. Certainly not the cost of like a full-time staff member.
Yeah, Adam, if I could interrupt real quick, just
Yeah.
for Olivia and Jared, and welcome, Chris. But part of what Adam is describing, some people describe it as a sales funnel, and you may hear about that term, the sales funnel. So if Adam's got 10 people that are interested in hiring him, probably not all 10 are going to be good clients. So at each step in the process, he's winnowing it down to like that 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever number of people who actually end up being a client. But he's vetted the process, the smart process has sort of vetted, filtered out who aren't good clients, who wouldn't be a good fit for him, or they for both ways. It's to try to get a good match. So this is like that client intake is like a funnel, so that at the end of the day, the client's happy with Adam and Adam's happy with the client, that there's a good match.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because that probably was, aside from just having, a list of questions that my intern asked, they are somewhat legally sophisticated. They're not a lawyer, but they're close. And so I was able to tell her, yeah, if they say this or that, then no. And she was able to be, and well, I had one and I have a new one, and they both know what we do well enough to turn clients away who aren't the right fit. Um, and it's a good exercise for an intern because like to you have to know the law, like you have to know post conviction and you have to know employment law or whatever your practice is if you do this with somebody else. They have to know it well enough to be able to sift through a prospective client if they're going to be a good fit or not. Now I generally tell them just double check with me because I don't want to turn around someone who would be a good client, but generally speaking, it's hey, this person usually they're in California and they want help with a DUI. And it's like, no, that's not like the post conviction. If I'm gonna do an out of state post conviction, it has to be like a high level felony. And even then there's some hurdles if I'm gonna do it out of state. So they generally know the rules well enough to keep me from talking to people that it's just not helpful for either of us to speak. And yeah, the intern I have now, she's amazing. And that's on the side note is I'm hoping to make enough money to hire her when she passes the bar, but I don't know if that's gonna happen. We'll see. So let's talk a little bit about Google Ads, SEO, video, ask my website type stuff. So in terms of, how do we get clients and how do I get clients? Really the short answer is Google Ads for me. I do have referrals. Like I said, that one, I think connecting with other attorneys for sure, but most all of my clients are from Google Ads. And I don't know, Mark, if you're having the same guy speak, but I remember he made a comment when we came where he said, I don't know the point of having a website if you're not going to have ads. Or he said something to that effect, like you're not sending anybody there. Some people, if you have referrals, I think that's a little overstated because people will come to your website. But generally, yeah, if you're going to put a lot of work into your website, it makes sense to me to pay for Google Ads or some kind of I guess the Bing has ads, but like, I don't know. I've done fine with Google. I think most people still use Google. Um, and I, so for my website, so that people would have ideally an appealing place to go, I started using Video Ask. And I got that idea from, is it last name Tate? Yeah. So there's an attorney that Mark showed us when I went through it, who's a not debt collection. He's a student debt attorney. That's all he does. And his website, he uses Video Ask. And Video Ask is a platform. It costs like, I want to say 300 a year. So I paid it for it annually. Um, and it's designed, I have not used it to its full potential. And that's still kind of a goal of mine at some point. I'm sure I could use it even more for what it does. But it's more or less to try to create a personable client intake experience, but on your website, because it plays a video of you and gives them the option to send you a response, to fill out a multiple choice, use conditional logic to kind of help them track through your website like they're having a conversation with you. And I've tried to do that, and my website kind of does that. It's kind of like you could have a conversation with me, an intake conversation, if you click through my videos. Um, I know I could do it more efficiently. I could do it better, but I do think that has been effective, especially for federal post conviction, because um, I get notifications whenever people watch the videos, and I get notifications all the time about people watching my federal post conviction overview video. And that's one of the main types of clients that hire me based on, I think, going to my website and seeing what's going on is federal post conviction. So I'm paying for the ads. They go to my website, and then they can go and they can learn about habeas corpus. They can learn about compassionate release. They can learn about um, clemency. They can learn about the various appeals, various different paths of federal post conviction relief. And it's me basically giving a short little presentation on it. It's similar to like a TikTok video, I guess, but it's built into my website. Uh, and I think that has been really effective for my post conviction practice. I've been doing employment law more recently, and I don't know enough yet to know that, but I've had a number of clients tell me they watch my videos. I have North Carolina post conviction videos too. I've had clients who call me and say that they watch my videos, and that's why they wanted to talk to me. And I think it just gives kind of a personable experience on your website. And my other thought was most other attorney websites aren't doing this, and I'm a solo, and I need some way to try to stand out. So that's part of why I did it too. So I was paying for ads, put Video Ask on my website. One other thing I want to mention real quick is about SEO. Now, I'm not an SEO expert by any stretch, but I did for a short period of time. I paid some people on Upwork internationally to try to maximize my SEO. And then I spoke to a advertising guy who said that was probably a waste of money. And I kind of thought it might be too, so I stopped doing it. But the one thing they did that actually was really helpful, I use a WordPress website. I don't know how they did it. I mean, I probably could reverse engineer it maybe, but they went into my website pages and they imported a tab or I'm not even sure the lingo, but they set something up where you could modify the SEO for that particular web page. Like you can input what's going to come up. You can input when you search what people are going to see. I think it's like Yoast SEO or something, and it's a function of WordPress you can add, and depending on your website domain or your website provider, then it might be different. But I'm sure the principle remains that if there is a way for you to knowingly adjust what people do see when they go to a web page or they search you, that's really helpful. Because the thing that I have on my website, and again, I don't know how true this is, but I've seen it pay dividends over time, that the longer my web pages have been live, I just get more calls. I start to get more calls, and I'm able to adjust, like, I don't know, if it's a habeas corpus page to pick something, I'll be able to adjust, like, you were convicted and you're challenging your conviction, or wrongfully convicted. This is, come talk to us. As opposed to when it just fills it in with default lingo, it's like unintelligible, nonsensical stuff. And so all of my pages, I've modified the SEO language so that it's at least sensible. And I do think I know enough to know that that optimizes SEO. And I do think that plays off of Google Ads in a particular way. And I haven't tested this, and maybe I could Google it and find a straight answer. I just haven't. I feel like I remember someone saying this to me, and it's been my experience. that it's been about 6 months after starting Google Ads on a particular thing that it starts gaining a whole lot more traction. I do know someone's told me, and I think this makes sense, that I know SEO takes time. It's like you are slowly populating the internet search traffic. I know personally that has been my experience, but it's been weirdly specific to almost right at 6 months. So with like federal post conviction, I started running ads in like November-ish of my first year. And then I got some calls, but like right around March of the following year, I started getting a whole lot more intake. And the same thing has started happening with employment law because I started running ads in like early March of this year. And then pretty suddenly, like the end of August slash this month, I've been getting a whole lot more intake. And I think it's just something around, it may not be 6 months, that's been my experience, but I know there's some kind of time delay. It's just like put the work in, pay the money for the ads for a while, make your website pretty and appealing, and over time it'll gain traction. And yeah,
Yeah,
So
I was
Adam,
gonna.
I have a question. Maybe I missed it. What is the SEO? Is that
search
search
engine
content? Something?
search engine optimization.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, it makes your search engine optimization. It means your website is more likely to come up when somebody Google searches, attorney in Durham. Jared Poon will be
Oh,
more likely to come up than attorney XYZ. So you want to optimize your chance of getting Googled. So to that point, Adam mentioned the guy. So tomorrow afternoon, Brian Craig he's a digital marketing guy, and so this is sort of his area of expertise. So he's going to talk about SEO, search engine optimization. He's going to talk about Google reviews. Rita Neal, who went through the program a year ago or so, um, she said she has like 50 Google reviews, 5-star ratings, and she says she gets a lot of clients because they read the Google reviews and go to her. So depending on your practice, depending on your clients, they're going to respond to different things on your webpage. It might be the Google review, it might be the video ask. And so part of it is just experimenting. For Rita, it was the Google reviews. For Adam, there's a couple different tools and you have to tweak it, experiment, and innovate. But we'll hear
yeah,
from Brian tomorrow afternoon. He'll talk more about some of this.
yeah. Google reviews is good too. I have 5 5-star reviews. I've tried to get more, but that has also paid dividends too. Um, so Chris just asked, which is a good question, if I built my own website. It's a good question because my experience was an interesting experience. So I had a great experience on Fiverr with getting my logo. I highly recommend Fiverr or any of those. I think there's other cheap comparable services for your logo. I do not recommend that for building your website because I did that and it was terrible, terrible experience. He built my website and it took forever and then it was super, super user unfriendly and I couldn't do it. So I basically ended up um I think I just rebuilt my website myself with some of my help from my brother-in-law who is a tech savvy guy. But I use WordPress and um I will say I use there's plenty of legal themes. I think I use like legal themes light. And that was really a helpful tip because I paid like $40 and then they give you kind of endless customer support once you buy their theme. So whenever I had issues with my website not working right, I would just send them a question. And I know I exceeded what I think was reasonably the $40, but that's what they said. So that's what I did. So I got their theme eventually to work really well on my website and figured it out. So website is a lot of different directions you can take, but with WordPress, you can find legal themes that'll more or less be pretty professional looking for you being an attorney. But other platforms I know like Squarespace or Google or whomever, you can find things that should be relatively intuitive. But and for that reason, I would try to do something basic yourself, and then maybe if you have a friend who can help you, or you may just need to fork out the money for a more experienced web developer. I would not do like a cheap online developer. You might have a better experience than I did, but it ended up just being a massive time suck for me. Um, so last couple of things I want to discuss, and we just got a few minutes. Um, don't take problematic clients as much as you can help it. As far as your process, um, I I think you generally know when someone's going to be a problematic client, and maybe not always, but if you do, I know, and I've done it. It's hard not to take them when you're new and trying to generate revenue, but um, it's just not worth it. And just learning to say no, or we're just not the right fit, even if they get mad about that, um, I think is important and something I'm trying to get better at. Because yeah, I got an all caps text the other day from a client who just doesn't understand how post conviction works and is mad at me and says they're going to report me to the bar. And it's like, you can report me to the bar if you want, because it's not going to go anywhere. But then I have to put it on my malpractice insurance to make my premium go up a little bit. That's just part of the job. But like, I kind of knew when I first talked to that family that I probably should just turn them down. And it's not always that way, but I get it in my field. Like post conviction people are in a really tough spot, so I try to be really empathetic to that. But generally, if they're already being really demanding or just kind of, I don't say disrespectful, maybe it is disrespectful, but just not very respectful of your perspective as an attorney in the early going, it's probably going to just track that way throughout the representation. And then you may just get a 1-star Google review, which is worse than just saying no to begin with. Um, so one, it's the very last thing I was going to say. I'll say, I think Mark put this in a email once, but you run a business, don't let the business run you. That's, at least I think, should be one of the main goals of this. Is there's so many tools out there in today's world to help your life as a business owner, as a solo practitioner, be easier, that if you get into a place where you feel you're at a frenzied pace, there's probably some space where you could automate. It might cost you a little money, but again, like, even whatever your hourly rate is as an attorney, even if it's 150 or 200 or if it's 400, I mean, it's still more valuable your time spent as an attorney than your time spent on uh, things that a non-lawyer could do. Now, some of those you're going to have to do. That's part of being a small business owner. I get it. But like, the more that you create space to spend time as an attorney, that's going to ultimately generate the most revenue. And that's what I try to focus on. And so then the very last thing, to talk about fees. Now, I know this is one of the biggest things as a solo that I think everybody wonders about. Ask other lawyers. There are lawyers in your field of practice, I've found, who are more than willing to just tell you what they charge. And that can give you some comparison points on if what you think you should charge. But then related to that, I think there is some merit to, you're not necessarily going to charge the same as a super experienced attorney in your space, but you can charge more than you probably think that you can. I've heard people say that, well, I'm new, so I can't charge those premium fees. That may be kind of true, but I don't know. Like, you can almost, I mean, people will pay if they trust you. It's not so much buying the service as it is buying you. And so if they trust you from the conversations that they've had with you, and some, I've heard one lawyer say, they tell clients, I'm not the cheapest lawyer and I'm not trying to be. And some clients appreciate that. Like, they don't necessarily want to just get a bargain lawyer. They want to get a good lawyer. And you have to navigate that for sure. And you may do payment plans if your overall fee or however you do it is too much. But you don't have to charge like bargain bottom prices just because you're a new attorney. I would just put it that way. Like, you care about your client, you're capable. If you're going to apply yourself, then your time is worth paying a good attorney for whatever your service is. And then in terms of access to justice and pro bono, I do think that the more that you can try to create a financially sustainable practice, the more than that can create space for the people that are truly in need, that at some point in your practice, you might have more space to do more of that. But yeah, don't feel like you have to sell yourself short just because you're newer in the field. Sometimes newer attorneys are hungrier and they spend more time really preparing than attorneys who have done a long time, and they might be a little bit apathetic on the case than as opposed to how you would be trying to prove yourself. So, and I don't know if y'all have talked about this at all, but in terms of, retainers or flat fees, payment plans, I mostly try to do flat fees, but now with employment, part of why I like employment is I like doing contingency fees because I like only getting paid if we win. One practical piece about that, though, I thought that I just wouldn't be competitive if I did not pay expenses. But then I talked to one attorney who said she always charged expenses, and then I got a client just recently who fired his attorney to hire me, and that attorney's engagement letter said that he would have to pay for all expenses. So at least in that area of the law, I don't know if it tracks in like personal injury, but for me, I've learned that it's not uncommon for smaller firms to charge the expenses of the litigation to the client, and then just you do the contingency fee based on whatever you settle for or get as a trial verdict. And that was a load off of my shoulders because I thought I had to do that, but I guess I don't. So um, that saves me a lot of stress financially to do it that way. Although I have pending cases right now that I will pay for expenses if we get there. But anyway, I know it's 2:30, so there you go.
Dude, time to go to the dentist. 2:30. Tooth hurdy. You ever heard that joke?
That's a true dad joke if I've ever heard it.
Time to go to
Dadjoke.com. Wow.
All right. Did y'all, Adam, that was great. Another thing I like about you, Adam, is you read my emails and like you,
Yeah, that's nice. That's
I
encouraging.
appreciate that. Yeah, I'll let you go, but Jared or Chris or Olivia, any burning question? If you don't mind, I'll share your email so people can reach you if they have
Yeah, for sure.
questions. But do y'all have
I think
any?
it's dope, Adam, that you employ current law students as interns. I think that's dope for you and it's dope for them because it gives them some experience as well. And I think that's a plus that we have being in Raleigh, Durham. We have access to a plethora of law students who are eager for that experience. So I think that's something that I was not thinking of that I think could be helpful.
Yeah, it's been tremendous. And again, I'm based near Nashville, Tennessee, so it's all remote. And but both my interns have been from Campbell.
Oh, cool.
Just because I happen to know a 3L when I first advertised that, who put it up on their board or something, and they reached out to me. But yeah, I mean, I would be pretty sure if you were to reach out to either of my interns, certainly my current intern, she would say it's been a really good experience. And I try to be very intentional about that. Um, I am very intentional about that because, again, frankly, I had a really bad experience in the professional legal world. I know that's not always the case, but I did. And so it's very important to me that my interns have a good experience with the professional legal world.
Good.
And yeah, I mean, I just know from being a law student that all the stuff that she's doing, there's so much stuff that she would not learn in law school that she's not going to learn in law school. That is super helpful for whatever, if I'm able to hire her someday, or if not, wherever she works, knowing how to work through intake with clients, having initial conversations with clients, knowing how our billing works to bill clients, all the legal research that she's done. We do some debt collection stuff, which is just fallen in my lap that she's kind of helping me oversee. Yeah, I mean, I know she's learning a lot that she wouldn't, and also I think that she's having a positive experience with me as her boss. At least I think she is. You could ask her if she say otherwise, but yeah, that's part of it to me too. Is I want law students to have better experiences in the legal field than I did, to be honest. So yeah.
Oh, if you want to talk about the debt collection stuff, we can talk about that, man. That's kind of the area I'm leaving from.
Yeah, I might actually want to pick your brain about that. It's all out here in, well, okay, it's kind of in Tennessee / around the country, but yeah, actually that would be helpful.
Cool,
Yeah.
brother. I'll make sure I send you my information.
All right.
For sure.
Well, thanks, Adam. I'll let you go and do what you got to do for the afternoon. But I appreciate it. This was good. Thank you very much.